having lived according to our own selfishness and desire to turn to Him, and because that's the holiness, is wanting to separate ourselves from the world, as he says in Romans 12, uh, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, which is the only way that we can, as the writer of Hebrews says, let us come boldly before the throne of God, not arrogantly, boldly, having confidence, not arrogance. Let us come boldly before the throne of God, that we may find mercy and grace to help in time of need. So as Paul is saying, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as living sacrifices, which is holy and acceptable unto Him, and which is your reasonable service, that you may be able to prove what is that good and acceptable will of God. Because unless we offer our bodies as living sacrifices, I mean, He's showing us right there and in other places that unless we humble ourselves and offer our bodies as living sacrifices every day, and deny ourselves and pick up our cross and follow Jesus. Jesus said, unless you hate your own life and pick up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of me. And He's not talking about us abusing ourselves, but He's talking about the same thing Paul is in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, where he says, I don't fight as one uncertainly, as one beats against the air, talking about a shadow boxer. He used a couple of boxing terms in that. He says, but I bring my body under, or actually the Greek word means to buffet, and it's not talking about in a physical sense. Paul is talking in a spiritual sense, talking about denying the flesh and making it your slave. And lest, as he says, unless I, after having preached to others, should become a castaway, which should really give context to some of those people that even as in his day, let us do evil that good may come, or as he says in another place in Romans 6, he says, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How should we who are dead to sin live any longer therein? Because as he says in Romans 6:7, he who is dead is freed from sin. He's made righteous from sin. And we done that, but when we planted ourselves into the likeness of Jesus' death, being baptized into Jesus Christ, being baptized in the name of Jesus, we died to what held us captive to sin, as he said in Romans 7:6. Having died to what held us. And let me put it like this, I'll just expound on that, a revelation of that having died to the law which held us prisoners to sin, as he's also describing in Galatians chapter 3, and that we should serve God in newness of spirit and not the oldness of the letter, talking about the law. And as he says in 2 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 3, verse 6, he says, for God has made us able ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, for the letter, but of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. I mean, so we need to, I mean, if we don't dig in and pay attention to the terminology that was being used when Jesus said, living, those that are after the flesh mind the things of the flesh, meaning they set the affections of their mind on the things of the flesh. But those that are after the Spirit, are born after the Spirit, set the affections of their mind on the things of the Spirit. The King James renders it, those that are after the Spirit mind the things of the Spirit. We need, is like Jesus said in the Gospel of John, you talking to the Pharisees, the Jews in his day, he said, you judge after the flesh. I judge no man. See, there we go with that term again, after the flesh, talking about the appearance, the form of the law, as Paul talked about. I give witness to my brother, my kinsmen, the Jews. They have a form of the knowledge and of the truth. That same knowledge and the truth that Paul told Timothy in chapter 3, verse 7, for some are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And the word knowledge used there in both instances means full discernment. And we need, if we will just stop, there's uniformity. It's just not haphazardly, saying things. He's saying them by the Spirit, and the Spirit of God is very uniform. He's not going to say it one way one time and through someone else say it a different way another time. That's why he said in one place in a letter that, do we not walk in the same steps? When Paul had sent other brethren to him, to check on them, to build them up in the Lord, to encourage them in the Word. That's why when James says, from where do wars and fightings come from among you? Do they not come from your members? He's talking about the flesh. He's not talking about a group of people. He's talking about the flesh, people that are being controlled by the selfish ambitions of the flesh. And we need to, otherwise there's just going to be confusion, chaos, and division. Because when Paul says keeping the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, he's not talking about sacrificing truth for peace, because he said in another letter, in another place, those that do not live after the traditions and the customs that we've taught you, not to keep company with them. So we need to understand. And the only way we're going